This is a treasure hunt, but we lost the treasure map. It's the ancient Mycenaeans, the superpower of the earliest Greek Bronze Age. They fought and won in the Trojan War, but what happened to them? So we got to do some Indiana Jones style archaeology, perhaps. We get our guy Heinrich Schliemann. He's going to pay for it himself, and he will start digging and find out where's the gold. I'm Mr. Hull. This is Ancient History. Welcome to Classical Kingdoms, where timeless stories reveal truth and wisdom for your journey. Today's journey is the superpower Greek Mycenaeans. What happened to them? This is a time when Heinrich Schliemann, an ambitious young German with deep pockets and an interest in the Iliad by Homer, and he really believed in something great. Have you ever believed in trying to accomplish or do something great to help people understand some mysteries, the mysteries of history? Because these Greeks, the Mycenaeans, were so powerful, friends with Sparta, they fought in the Trojan War. What happened to them? Heinrich Schliemann refused to believe it was all just a myth. That's what the experts were telling him. He said, give it up, don't even bother. But he ended up dedicating his entire life and his entire fortune to proving that these legends were real. And what he discovered would rewrite and help us understand history, especially the contributions and the roles of the Greeks in the development of Western civilization. So this story matters to you because it's going to help us look at history, and also maybe for you. Do you have a dream like Heinrich Schliemann? Something that's made such an important difference in the history of everybody in understanding the role of the Greeks. They gave us democracy. They gave us chewing gum. They gave us a little bit of everything. The story matters to you because it asks us to look at history and understand it, and ask us to look at ourselves when we have an ambition like Heinrich Schliemann did. This is the world of the very first Greeks, and by the end of this lesson, we'll come back to his story, discover some of the surprises in the cautionary lesson. This is lesson number 23 in your ancient history course. We're stepping into the story of the Mycenaeans to ask the big questions, discover how does it shape history and how it still shapes your journey. So in this lesson, first, let's discover the warrior kings, the power of the Mycenaeans from the legend that then becomes real history. Second, let's explore the actual archaeological site, the tour of the citadel and the tombs that I've done many times. It's really interesting. Third, let's look at the dark curse of the house of Atreus. And then finally, the shipwreck. The shipwreck and other archaeological lessons for us about how high the power and authority was of the Mycenaeans before they fall. So that by the end of this episode, we're going to make you an expert, a philosopher, a historian, even an economist to take you one step further in your classical journey. Imagine a world that's ruled not by some big empire. In the Bronze Age, a network of different fortress kingdoms across Greece, and each kingdom is centered on a mighty palace, protected by massive walls, built on strategic hills. And this was the world of the Mycenaeans. You can see the strategic hill that it's built on, and we heard the legends on the authority. The society was organized. The king was called the Wanax. The Wanax had this ultimate ruler authority, the chief priest. He's the leader of the war. And beneath him were the commander of the army, the structure, the warrior classes. It was structured. Farmers, craftsmen, laborers. So we see evidence that this palace system and these strong warriors that were similar to the Mycenaeans, they had other city-states besides Mycenae that were friendly to them. It was hierarchical. It was military-focused. It was the early and mid-Bronze Age. For thousands of years, this entire world was just a legend. What I just told you was not proven with archaeological authority, but Heinrich Schliemann grew up hearing these legends. He grew up reading the Iliad. He wondered What could he do that would unearth, literally, find the evidence, argue back against the scholars that just said these things are stories? Agamemnon and Mycenae are real in the mind of Heinrich Schliemann, and he wanted to set out to find it. No one knew where to look, but that didn't matter to a German businessman. Heinrich Schliemann's pockets were pretty deep. He could pay for this archaeological adventure. He refused his whole life to believe all these experts that said this is just a legend. He was convinced Homer's stories were true. He took his fortune in the 1870s and started to spend it on digging in Greece. He got a tip that some sheep herders had been taking a break from the sun under this lion's gate. Spectacular looking gate in this pile of rocks. He started digging. And amazingly, he started to find the treasures of the engineering, the treasures of the gold. He uncovered the golden treasures. Of course, everybody wants to look at the face of Agamemnon, and you can do that in the museum now, but Heinrich Schliemann said, I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon, because he found this gold mask and a lot of other gold too. About 12 pounds, 17 pounds worth of gold in this mask. Compare that to King Tut's mask. How does that stack up? It's not quite as heavy. Maybe they got the ideas because they traded with the Egyptians about these gold masks. King Tut comes later, actually. Anyway, Heinrich Schliemann's story, as he starts to, find the treasure, it's like a fantasy. It's like if you had set out for this adventure, put yourself in a movie like Indiana Jones. Can you imagine the excitement that Heinrich Schliemann would have had? But more importantly, how it connects to all of history as we piece together all of these important ancient Greek powerhouses, superpowers like the Mycenaeans. Schliemann had ambition. And what about your ambition? What ambition could you have that could be this adventure, but also something that serves a great purpose? And for us, we're able to have this better understanding of history. But one problem, he was more a businessman and someone who could pay for this than he was a careful archaeologist. He was in such a hurry with the dig at Mycenae. The big problem was actually over at the dig of Troy, right? In the Iliad, Mycenae and a bunch of Greek city-states unite together to go and fight Troy in the Trojan War. That's lesson 25. When Schliemann goes to the site of Troy and starts digging, he basically digs out like a huge wedge because he wants to be able to see all the layers. These ancient cities are built on hills. They do eventually get conquered. It's always a game of king of the hill, and you have the high ground. It's an impressive citadel. How anybody could ever destroy this citadel is beyond me, but it can be done. Troy was destroyed multiple times, and Heinrich Schliemann wanted to cut a pie piece out of the whole site so he could see all the layers of the pie, the cake. Think of it as a layer cake, and he wanted to see all the layers at once. This is one of the mistakes that he made, as he destroyed a lot of the evidence he was actually seeking to find. His quest for glory actually erased a part of the history that he loved. But Schliemann's story tells us that powerful lesson, and we're going to look more at the sites that he gave us in this lesson and other lessons. But he needed to balance some of that with wisdom and caution, and taking some of the advice from the other archaeologists. He shows us that this noble quest needs to be done carefully. But let's go to the site now. Let's check out the citadel, the tombs, and all the archaeology that show us how the superpower of the Bronze Age really worked. I've got some footage to show you from 2014. It was a group of students and parents that I took on a school trip to this site and a lot of other places. But it reminded me when I went for the very first time in 1989. I was a college student, and I heard superpower, Mycenae. When I saw the size of this site, it's really pretty small. if we just take a moment to think, in ancient times, there aren't that many people. So even these superpowers, even these mighty cities like Mycenae, were relatively small. And the scale that we look at cities and superpowers today, it's not even remotely close. Literally, this entire site that we're going to explore right now would fit in a small neighborhood, inside of a small neighborhood. They aren't that big. But to the ancient Greeks and Minoans and Egyptians and Trojans, this was the superpower. And they weren't just warriors. They were brilliant engineers. So let's explore the way we did back in 2014. And many times since, I love going to this site. It's really great. And our tour guide is Sophia. She was so kind. One time she gave me a box of tree-ripened apricots. You can only get them in a place like Greece in June when they come to season. It was incredible. Okay, but I digress. There's no better way to see this citadel than to climb up thinking like you are an attacking enemy invader. You've got to scale the walls. You've got to figure out how to get inside. You got to lay siege on these places. It's just a fun climb, an awe-inspiring visit, especially as you get close and you start to notice the size of the stones. These are built with what we call Cyclopean masonry. They are Cyclopean walls. These are enormous rough-cut boulders, some of them weighing 10, 20, 40 tons. Single-sized, single rocks, single carved, rough cut. And how in the world could you use these blocks to build walls that are approaching 50 feet high, up to 25 feet thick? And some of these blocks, you would need cranes and pulleys or something. It actually is a mystery, and later Greeks could not imagine how normal humans could build with blocks that are this big, Cyclopean walls. You need to keep a lookout for when you see Cyclopean walls. There's some in Athens, they're in different places, but they're very difficult, and it's a mystery. And so what do? When you don't know how to explain or understand something, what do? Make a myth. The Cyclops. Do you know that in this area, they found elephant skeletons? In this area, they don't have petting zoos. They don't have zoos. You may not have an education. You don't have a understanding what an elephant is. And if you find an elephant skull, what does it look like? It looks like there's a big eyeball in the middle. It's a cyclops. So these mythological cyclops. Oh, and Homer put it into one of his legends about the Odyssey. So it's around this belief that cyclops are doing things like helping build walls. Now, as we climb this ramp, you are funneled into kind of this narrow channel as you get close to the Lion's Gate. This is not an accident. Think strategically. Why is this engineered this way? Why is it designed? As you approach, remember, you're thinking as an enemy approacher. Attackers would just be trapped here. The defenders have the high ground. They rain down arrows and spears and rocks, throwing stones. That's one thing archaeologists like to find. These bastion towers above are easy to defend. And they're kind of taunting you, right? Why do you have lions on your gates? Yeah, because they're king of the jungle. They're powerful creatures. This gate is the oldest piece of monumental sculpture in all of Europe. And these two massive lionesses, they are the symbol of royal power. And they stand guard here, right? They're designed to intimidate you and remind you that the power of the king, the Wanax, inside, he's your boss. He's going to run this kingdom, this classical kingdom for everybody. Once you pass through, that climb continues because the whole site here is over 900 feet at the summit. And so from the parking lot or even further down when you visit the tomb.
So we're walking over here.
It's a climb. But
Get
it's
a
a
view of the
spectacular view, as you
courtyard,
can see from some of the more
which is
recent
that
footage
little
I've
circle.
taken. It's always a good
do not
time.
see any water.
The weather is beautiful, of course.
Yes, there's no.
At the very top, you can look down and you can see the Megaron, the Great Hall, the throne room, where the Wanax is the chief administrator of this civilization, this society, this village, and keeping records. We found Linear B. Linear B was the early Greek version of language. That's business record keeping. And we know that they're rich, they're successful, they're powerful from everything, especially the fact that they could afford to build a place like this. If they came under siege, you know what siege warfare would be. It would be the type of warfare that you'd want to be on the high ground, right? They're going to surround your city. The walls are going to be your protection, and you're going to stay inside as they've laid siege around you. They're going to have a lot of ways to try to mess with you from the outside. So the most important thing, if you're going to put a citadel, put a city-state on one of these hills, the most important thing's got to be a water source. The Mycenaeans have this water source. And sometimes it's open, sometimes it's blocked off when you go to visit this thing, but it's always cold. It's like the coolest place. Greece can get very hot, especially in the summer. And there is still water down there. This is 2014, so batteries and, just dealing with cameras and memory chips and all this, it was a real hassle, but I'd given the camera for Ben and Cole to just explore this citadel. So we thank Ben and Cole for all this footage that they were giving us, and then their exploration as they go down into the cistern, which is a great reminder of engineering, brain power, defending, knowing. You couldn't be a superpower if you didn't know what you needed in a site like this citadel. So it's an exciting and impressive place. From the cistern, you're not very far away from the hidden postern gate on the back side here. So that's on the back side of the fortress, pretty close to the water source. And it's just geographically, when you look at this whole area, you think there's no way attackers could even come from that side. That their geography, that the wall is not their only defense. It's the hills, it's the location. So this is why they're a superpower. They have the perfect geographical location, the topography. In Greece, when you study Greece, topography matters all the time. So the Citadel of Mycenae isn't just a ruin. It isn't just a pile of rocks. It's really a masterclass in psychological military architecture. Every stone, every passage, every gate designed to protect the power of the superpower Mycenae and survive. And for the people to survive that are hiding inside after coming there in the danger. It's truly a fortress fit for the legendary king. And who is the legendary king? Is it going to be Agamemnon? Of course, there were many strong kings going on hundreds and hundreds of years. The Mycenaeans showed honor to these kings with spectacular burial tombs. Did they get this idea from somebody else? Who else does spectacular burial tombs? Mummification type of bury them with gold masks. Who else does this? Did they trade with Egypt? Because they might have stolen some of those ideas. And Egypt has a lot of style, so who wouldn't want to copy the Egyptians? Because these are not simple graves. The one that is the most famous, there's several around that you could explore, but this one that I've got a little bit of footage is really a pretty simple grave. And the dome structure is actually remarkably simple, but it is monumental because of this corbeling system that the Greeks invented. They engineered this dome, and they call it the Tomb of Agamemnon. Schliemann calls it the Treasury of Atreus, this treasure that he pulled from this archaeological site. But when they discovered the corbeling system and these domes, they realized that these domes are the biggest. This is actually the biggest dome in the history of the world for quite a long time, until the Pantheon is built in Rome. And really that was almost 2,000 years after the engineering of this tomb. This dome, it's a beehive-shaped dome, and they kind of stack. The corbelling means they kind of stack as a counterbalance. Each one's kind of stepped up and stacked. Each ring of the giant stone blocks is placed slightly inward from the one below it. And you could build this yourself. You had little blocks. You could corbel a bunch of blocks together. This one went almost 43 feet, almost 50 feet tall. When you look up, it is deceptive. Sophia, the tour guide, is going to ask, how tall is this thing? And there's even an optical illusion. Like you're going to think I was way off. I mean, it looks like it's hundreds of feet tall. So it's over 1,000 years, almost 2,000 years, that this is the biggest. And so the Pantheon in Rome is going to get built there in the 1st century AD, which then they've invented concrete by then, and more domes are going to get invented after that. So if you want to track the biggest domes in the world, this is it for, at least 1,400 years, however it's dated. So, by the way, if you are enjoying this journey to the Citadel, anywhere that you go with Mr. Hull, we're going to take you to some really important places for your classical journey. So make sure that you click the like button right now. Subscribe to the channel. It really helps Classical Kingdoms. And if you want the full course experience, go to classicalkingdoms.com for all the features that are available there. Don't miss a single lesson. This is a complete history course. Now, the dark curse of Atreus. Students are saying, Mr. Hull, it's a history class. Why do we keep talking about myths? You tell me. Why is the dark curse of the house of Atreus? In this segment, we have to dig into more legend, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and now these very strange, dark stories. Why do they exist? They're important. The power of Mycenae is leveled up a little bit by some of these stories, wouldn't you say? Would you say that the stone walls are one way to get power, but if you have these incredible legends that follow you around, do people kind of, look at these Mycenaeans? They came out of this story, the royal family of the Mycenaeans, the house of Atreus, that everyone knows is cursed, right? Because of their ancestor, Tantalus. He offended the gods in terrible ways, right? And you probably know myths and know the word tantalize. And some of this is just, it's pretty gross. And maybe you learn some of these variations of the story. But if I just told you that it was a terrible, offensive, if I just told you it was terrible and offensive, could you just trust me on that? Because it was a curse that the gods placed on Tantalus, and it got passed down to the famous Pelops, where the name Peloponnesian comes from. Pelops is the guy that gets the name for this entire lower section of Greece, the Peloponnesian Peninsula. But he's cursed, and that curse falls with its fury upon Pelops's 2 sons, and it gets passed down again, the curse of this family. Atreus and Thyestes, the 2 brothers, are locked in this bitter rivalry over the throne of Mycenae, a power struggle. The power struggle from a cursed family. There's betrayal and there's deceit. And Atreus, in an act of horrific vengeance, decides to end the rivalry once and for all. Atreus murders his brother's young sons. And then he commits an act of unspeakable evil. And this is part of the story I already skipped, but I got to at least say one of them. He cooks the kids and serves them to his brother Thyestes at a feast. This is a powerful and horrifying example of vice. It's not virtue. And so it's in the legends. And people are supposed to react in a horrific way. That's why these legends are there. the man was so consumed by revenge that he just abandoned all morality, decency in what he did to continue this curse. It's a terrible act. It seals the curse on this family. And so it was Atreus' sons who would inherit that curse, and those sons were named Agamemnon and Menelaus. Those two powerful kings appear to be heroes, don't they, in the Trojan War story, when we get to that in lesson 25? But this legend, it builds some importance in a very dark curse. But King Agamemnon, King Menelaus are brothers, and they are two of the strongest leaders of the Greeks going into the very significant Trojan War struggle. The Trojan War, in a way, is just the next chapter in this family's dark and bloody history. This curse would follow Agamemnon all the way home from the Trojan War, leading to his own murder by his wife. It's a story that the great Greek playwrights would return to again and again. All of this, the Greek playwrights, dig into that. They have some really wild stories out there. But the myth of the House of Atreus is more than a scary story, an extreme cautionary tale. It's about the hunger for power, the poison of revenge, and how it destroys family for generations, and ultimately destroys Mycenae. Where did it go? Why is Heinrich Schliemann looking for Mycenae? Nobody was looking for Athens. They knew exactly where it was. Mycenae had been lost. They lose their superpower status. And the curse, it's a myth, but it helps people understand some of the hard to understand. That's what myths do. So if you have another favorite myth, or if you have a reaction to any of these, or dig into a little extra detail, let us know in the comments. It'll be interesting to see what you say about some of the powerful lessons that come from the virtue and the vice. There's a lot of vice in Greek myths, Greek plays. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. Put it in the comments. This is, after all, a classical journey into history, virtue, and wonder. And you can only wonder what people were thinking when they wrote some of these myths. So let's look at a shipwreck, the Uluburun shipwreck, and let's wrap up with archaeology that's going to show the significance of the Mycenaean power. And we know that the military engineering, we know that the Citadel site was incredible, and that shows us a lot of the power. The dark myths do show a significant amount of power. People wouldn't tell these stories if there wasn't some importance to the characters, to the Mycenaeans. But could we measure any of the power? Do we have some artifacts that would really show us their influence and stretch across the Aegean Sea? Because in 1982, off the coast of modern-day Turkey, a sponge diver found one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. He found a Bronze Age shipwreck called the Uluburun shipwreck, and it sank around 1300 BC. So that's pretty much at the absolute height of Mycenaean power. So what's in the shipwreck? Really valuable. I mean, if you were the owners, if you were the investors, you would be so mad. There were incredible treasures. It's an unbelievable amount of cargo. And it's not just a simple trading vessel. This was a treasure trove that revealed incredible interconnectedness of the ancient world. The main cargo, 10 tons of copper from the island of Cyprus. You know, the word Cyprus means copper island. And 1 ton of tin, which is almost the ratio of the recipe, right? Isn't it like 88% copper and 12% tin? So that's like incredibly valuable. And some of this tin came on the Silk Road as far away as Afghanistan. We figure the copper, the tin, to make bronze, and that's the metal of the Bronze Age, of course, 1300 BC. But that's just the beginning. There were logs of rare African ebony wood. Oh, we haven't talked about ebony wood from Egypt, but it would have come down the Nile River going north, and coming from the deep reaches of Africa. Ebony is a very hard wood. some rare glass ingots from Canaan. So glass ingots, these are the earliest glass ingots that have ever been found. And in Canaan, the Phoenician traders, the connections with pottery from Cyprus and from Canaan, the connections with ivory, again, from the Nile River, would have been coming down the Nile River, elephants, hippopotamus, ostrich eggshells, amber from the Baltic region, a golden scarab, and it had a name of a famous Egyptian queen, Nefertiti. All of this in this one shipwreck. So we could have just gone straight to this lesson to understand that this shipwreck proves trade and interconnectedness, but Mycenaean swords, Mycenaean beads, Mycenaean seals, as in like those signature seals that they would stamp, proving that this trade is involving the superpower of the time. It's treasure. It's things that, well, the Uluburun shipwreck, it's just a perfect snapshot. The global economy of the Bronze Age. The Mycenaeans were at the heart of it, and they were the customers for some of these incredible goods that could have made them more bronze swords, and maybe this is why they fell. They ran out of bronze because it's at the bottom of the shipwreck. They had the power and the riches and the command to have these trade connections from Egypt, Asia and the Silk Road, the Near East, and this ship, more than any other discovery, shows us that the Mycenaeans were not just local kings. I guess that's a big takeaway, not just local kings. They were a true superpower. This is what a superpower was back then. It's a major hub. It's a global network that the Mycenaeans were pushing hard into with trade and diplomacy. We've got evidence of diplomacy, and they are at their absolute peak right now. And of course, classicalkingdoms.com. In this lesson, there is some free deep dive research that's always available in the free lessons, but don't miss out on the full lesson number 23 here on the Mycenaeans and the other ones as they relate to your classical journey. So let's go back to where we started, and that was the adventurer. And I was asking, would you be that adventurer? Have you thought of something? Add it in the comments right now of like a dream treasure hunt, like Heinrich Schliemann. He was ambitious, he was passionate, and he was wealthy enough to pay for it. And it would make for a great Indiana Jones type movie in some way, but maybe you have a better one so that you someday could say, I gazed at the face of Agamemnon, or better, imagine Heinrich Schliemann picking up that gold mask of Agamemnon. But always being remembered, overshadowed with his kind of reckless techniques of archaeology that's really a problem in the Trojan site. But his hurry to find what he was looking for and his partial destruction doesn't overshadow the ultimate courage that he had. He was no coward, and his story is a timeless reminder that our greatest strengths, our noblest ambitions must be guided by wisdom and prudence. And we thank all the historians and the archaeologists that were a part and still a part. They are still digging up new things, and they're still digging literally at the Mycenaean site. I always check to see, and they're finding new things from ancient history and helping us to understand our world and our journey on the contributions that the Greeks made. More than just giant walls of this warrior kingdom, we have now listened to the dark whispers of the cursed royal family and a snapshot of incredible wealth frozen in time at the bottom of the sea. The Mycenaeans were a true superpower, but by 1200 BC, the palaces, the great palace system, the trade networks, they were burned out. It's a bit of a mystery. The writing system actually takes a big gap. We lose evidence. Like all these things that we were talking about just kind of stop with a perfect storm of invasions, droughts, earthquakes, system collapses. There's a lot of problems. in this Bronze Age collapse, and that'll be covered in more depth in a different lesson. But we appreciate being able to look at the superpower of the Mycenaeans and their treasure, and to understand the superpowers of other times and what they need to do and what they need to do to not fail. So thank you for taking the time to learn something that matters through all of history, and that includes your history, some classical truth for your journey, because kingdoms rise and fall, power fades, but virtue endures.